Happy Monday. Such an honor to bring in a cat who has been really searching for his own individual sound since he was a young cat back in Israel. And he has come to the United States long ago and was embraced by some of his elders. Found himself on the bandstand and in the studio, able to sing for his supper in a number of different ways, which has really become an incredibly arduous task for anybody who's looking to create spiritual original music. Oz Noy, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, brother. I just kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about, especially the younger cats, just because, I was born in 78. You were born in the 70s too. We were relatively analog for probably 20
Sure.
something years of our life, and auditory learning. How did you approach finding your own individual sound?
Well, I never really thought about it like that. I
Yeah.
just played. I studied what I had like maybe one or two private teachers in Israel. So I just follow what they were telling me to do, in the beginning, without kind of asking too many questions. I just did it. And then you start to listen to all sort of music, and whatever really draws you, that's what you do. And that's what I did. I wasn't really thinking about being like this, whatever, unique, blah, 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 solo artist. So I just wanted to play and play with good people and play good music.
Do you feel like most of your learning early on when you picked up the apparatus was auditory? Did you learn to hear the music before you learned to read music?
No, I wish I did, but I did not.
It worked out pretty well though, you know? It's
Well,
okay.
yeah, I guess, but I wish I did. I did use more of my ear. Like, it's not that I don't use my ear, but I learned through books and instructional stuff that teachers gave me, or like videos. Of course, I transcribed a lot, but I'm not like a ear kind of guy that learned everything by ear kind of thing. Not at all.
Right. I'm just curious, like, could you talk a little bit about like the indigenous folk music scene growing up? Before obviously you were born in 72, but I'm just
Yeah,
curious about like in the 80s especially, what was I remember interviewing Harvey Brooks. I don't know if
yeah,
you ever crossed paths with
yeah.
him,
I
but
know. Yeah, I know Harvey.
he lived down and he still lives there in Israel. He was in Tucson where I lived for a long time, but
Yeah.
he was just talking even in the 2000s, the pulsating folk music of the urban centers in Israel. But do you remember a time when you sort of came across some indigenous folk music that was outside of any kind of, liturgy or text that you could find that kind of blew your mind?
I think what I listened to is what everybody listened to. There wasn't anything hidden that you wouldn't know about, and only it was anything. But the music that everybody listened to at the time was very, very good. I'm talking about Israeli music, because what happened there was, I grew up on the Beatles. So, I grew up on the Beatles and on Israeli pop. But Israeli pop at the time was a mix of a lot of things. It was a mix of rock and roll, but it was a mix of a lot of, I would say, classical music or harmony that came from Eastern Europe. And there's a couple of
Wow.
really brilliant
Wow.
composers, that singer-songwriters that had really famous bands and solo careers that are up that then they kind of took that harmony and mixed jazz in it, and it's absolutely brilliant. So that's what, and it's complex music. It's not like simple harmony. That was the popular music at the time. That and some more rock and roll stuff. So that's what I grew up with, and that's what I still like till this day. There was always the Middle Eastern influence that I wasn't really into, but at the time, that influence, it was the real thing, where like the artists that were doing it, they were very underground, but they were doing it for real. You know what I mean?
Oh
Now,
my God, this is great. What were the
yeah.
names of you're telling me that this sophisticated harmonic, melodic, pop music, these composers?
Yeah, in Israel, absolutely,
Oh
100%.
my God.
A
What were their
lot of
names?
that's
Yeah.
um some of the artists. I
Oh,
can get Mati Caspi is one freaking brilliant genius. Yoni
Jesus.
Rechter, amazing. Uh, Danny Sanderson. There's so many. I can't even.
No, no, it's I mean the point is you still listen to it to
Oh, I
this
love
day.
it. I think it's brilliant today too. It's absolutely brilliant. It's really, really good writing.
I want to
In
be clear though, like this was dance music too.
No, no,
Like
no, no, no. It
yeah,
wasn't dance music. It was
right.
just singer-songwriter stuff. It was
Interesting.
it was folk, but it wasn't folk like Bob Dylan folk. It was like
Yeah,
it was,
right, right,
it's
right.
the
Yeah.
80s, electric guitars, piano, like it's kind of like, you know what it is? It's like imagine like Elton John and Billy Joel. It's that kind of stuff.
Dig. Well, that's amazing. I mean,
And
that's still
there was some bands that were more like the Eagles-ish, but it wasn't country. It was that sound of the Israeli music. It's really great. It's very, very unique.
I'm curious, like obviously you took some lessons, didn't ask a lot of questions, sort of kept your head down and just woodshedded for a long time. But there were cats like when did this might be out of left field, but when did like guys like Dean Parks or Larry Carlton or Dennis Coffey or Tommy Tedesco come on your radar?
None of them came on my radar except of Larry Carlton. Because Larry
Okay.
Carlton was really famous for, like the Steely Dan stuff. And then he had a solo career. So I had a few of his solo albums. That's all I knew at the time. Only when I moved to New York and I started to be aware of the studio guys, maybe in the last year or two of my life in Israel, I started to be aware of the studio guys. So I heard about Tony Tedesco and Dean Parks. But those guys weren't any influence on me. I just knew they played on all that records. Where
No, I know. I'm assuming that my vision of you is like some young cat just finding these records,
Larry
because
Carlton was a big, big influence for a while. Yeah, absolutely.
just in his ability to sort of tell a story in a short period of time. What was,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's that and his tone and his feel. And he also played, I think his greatest work is actually on the Night Flight record, the Donald Fagen Night Flight
It's
record.
I didn't know how many tracks he was on. I
He
love him
was
with the
on a bunch.
Crusaders. Yeah, yeah.
He was on a bunch, and I think that was his best. Like, and I grew up on that record, and
Oh
also
my God, that record's
also on
insane. Yeah.
Gaucho and all that stuff. But and then there was his solo album. I forgot the names. I had two of them. So between those two, and then there was an instructional video of his that came out, so you can kind of see he was a big thing, at the time.
Were you hip to him with the Crusaders?
No.
Yeah, the earlier band with Joe Sample and those
I
cats.
know
I
I
mean,
know about it, but I was not hip to it. I didn't even know who the Crusader was at the time.
so
Now I
so
do,
I'm
but not.
like in terms of it's so interesting because when you were just sort of, I mean,
By the
CB,
way, you're
yeah,
talking about the 80s. There was a lot of shred going on. I was totally into Steve Vai and Satriani and all those guys,
that's true, man. No, I forgot it was that guitar shreds band. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. No, like how I guess I would love to know ultimately what the studio scene was like in Israel because for a lot of those cats like Dean, I've interviewed Louis Shelton, Dean Parks, I haven't gotten to Larry yet, and then all the guys like David Spinoza and John
Hmm.
Tropez. I mean, they do a jingle in the morning, they'd have a date, and then another date at night, and I mean their calendars were always full, and they were always playing
Yeah.
different kinds of music, but it was being made by human beings. And I just
Yeah.
did you get into the studios when there was
I, wa-
still
I
yeah.
wasn't lucky enough to like what happened is I left Israel when I was 24. So from the age of let's say 16 to 24, I was a professional guitar player and I played a lot of jazz gigs on the side, but I played with a lot of the big Israeli artists. So I played on a few big records there. I've done session work there, but it was nothing even close to the amount that Spinoza and Dean and all those guys were doing it. It wasn't even close. And then when I moved to New York, by the time I started to get a little more known and people knew me, there wasn't that much studio work. I've done some stuff. I still do some stuff, but it's not that much because the whole thing kind of died down. Like I missed on the hot period where everybody's working 24/7.
Absolutely. No, I dig that. I was more curious about if you could talk about the aesthetic of hitting at the same time when you did do studio work in Israel. Was the methodology, because I just
It
remember
was the
when I
same.
yeah.
Yeah, they had 24-track tape machines. I grew up in studios with tape machine where you had to wind and you have to do punches analogically. I grew up with that, absolutely.
But you were essentially hitting with everybody in the room. You weren't doing overdubs.
I would do both.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, because I mean it's not like the propensity of studio music obviously was curtailed quite a bit in the 80s and into the 90s, but I just wanted you to talk a little about your philosophy as it relates to in recording of your own albums and stuff, just the magic of everybody hitting at the same time.
Of course. Well,
I mean,
yeah,
it's self-evident to us, but nowadays everything is done in such a piecemeal fashion.
correct.
And I
Well,
just wanted you to talk about that magic of even hitting a clam. I mean, I remember Louis Shelton talking about Last Train to Clarksville, or Spinoza overbent a string on Right Place, Wrong Time, Dr. John. Those made it on the album and they became big hits
yeah.
because they were all hitting it. I mean, I wanted you to talk about the magic of hitting, especially in the studio at the same time.
I have a little theory about it. I think, when you listen to these old records, you can hear little, not mistakes, but little clams like that. And it doesn't really bother you. Like it's not really exposed. It doesn't really bother you. But I think that would not work today because I think the quality of the recording is so much clearer and more pure now that you can hear everything. And I think because of that, it would jump a little more. Like it will kind of jump out a lot. And also we're so used to listening to stuff that's just perfect. So that's
Okay, so
another
I
thing.
want, this is so important. Like, why? That's my daughter's, like, I cannot listen to modern recorded music because it's too.
I like modern recorded music. I don't have a problem with it at all. I like as
Yeah.
long as the songwriting is good
Yeah.
and the singer is good, the production is good, and usually the production these days is freaking amazing on pop records. So I don't expect it to be and to feel like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. You know what I mean? Like people in the room. I just don't expect it, or Aerosmith, or whatever, or
Right.
Van Halen. I don't expect it, so it's just a different thing, and I like it. Like I have no problem with it at all. I actually like pop music of today. Again, the stuff that it's a little too, let's say, quantized or too like sterile, maybe not as much, but still I don't have a problem with a lot of that stuff. I like it. I don't know. I just like.
I can't deny the lyricism, or I'm just talking about the feeling of the
I don't have a
recording.
problem. To me, a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff, even if it's there's a thing called bit detector when you have to put all the drums on a grid to make it,
Yeah.
but then they can put samples on it, or they can put loops on top of it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me. It's like, it sounds to me like it's a part of the style of what's going on today. I don't mind it.
I
I
did.
wouldn't expect that to be on a jazz record or on a rock and roll record, but for the style of what it is now, which is pop, I'm not talking about a rap and stuff like that when it's all programmed. I'm talking about stuff that's like at least some program, some played. It doesn't bother me. I like it.
Well, of course. I mean,
Sorry.
I really appreciate. I love your philosophy. I mean, to me, like, there's nothing better. I do want, but in terms of your
It's
own
a
stuff,
different thing, It's a different thing when you have a band playing, maybe without a click, and the stuff is kind of a little more loose. It's just a different. It's almost like I think about it as a different style. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, there's something about Well, the other thing I wanted you to talk about, especially from your own, the thing that, again, I'm not a producer and I'm not even a musician, but it's like the idea that, they feel the necessity because we're overindulgent with all this technology. They mic every part of the drum kit. And so to me, there's something about the lack of breathing with it. I just wanted you to talk about your philosophy. The thing that was magical about certain periods of our, at least in this country, is that there was something called good leakage. Once you got the room
I agree
sound,
with you. I agree with you.
can you talk about what is?
Well, wait, here's what I can say about it.
Yeah.
A lot of those records that are kind of legendary in our ears, and because they had a certain magic for a certain period, and everybody played in a room together, and it was a magical thing. And it's because of the songs are really good, and the artist is really good. If you listen to recordings from the 70s or 60s, or some in the 80s, and you listen to the sounds, like the actual sound, it doesn't sound good. The drums don't sound good. A lot of the instrument, they just sound and recording got so much better in the last 40 years or something,
Right.
So that's my opinion about it. Like, there's certain recordings like from the 70s, early stuff that you hear and that I listen to now. And if I isolate the instrument, I don't listen to the whole thing because the whole thing is magic. But if you just listen to the way the drums sound, sometimes you go like, wow, that doesn't sound good at all. And today you get amazing sounds, and then you get amazing people that mix this stuff. It sounds 10 times better in terms of the quality. The thing that I think me and you are talking about is more about the vibe of having something together in a room. You know what I mean?
Well,
And
I mean, I was watching this.
That's irreplaceable, that's irreplaceable. That will never change. Like that whole thing about having a bunch of musicians in a room playing a song or improvising jazz or whatever, that will never change. That results that you get from that will never change.
I was watching it before I passed out last night. I was watching some clips of your organ trio at the bitter end, and I was like hearkening back to this incredible record, Chester Thompson, not the drummer, the B3 player.
I don't know.
He did this album in the early 70s called Powerhouse, and it was he was kicking pedals, and he had a drummer, trombone, and sax. And when you're playing with Jerry Z, I would love you to, as a guitar player who in that setting is definitely trying to be in the moment, being present. It's not a studio gig. Is there a discernible difference in the bass lines or the roundness of the notes when somebody's kicking pedals versus either a bass fiddle or an electric?
100% there is, yeah. It's completely.
Can you talk about it? Because this album, if you don't know this album, Powerhouse, I've never heard bass lines. They're like bubbles. They're just incredible on the B3.
Yeah, it's not comparable. You can't compare B3 bass playing into a regular bass play. It starts with the sound. The sound is just different. It's a different attack. It's different harmonics. It's just a different thing. And then the approach itself, he's playing with. It's just different. It's not a bass player, and it never will be. So, when I play with an organ, I don't expect it to sound like a bass player. It has to sound like the organ. You know what I mean?
Exactly. To me, like, it was just wonderful to see the groove that you guys got.
Oh yeah, that stuff is great. If you have an organ player that has a good groove, it's awesome.
Did you well, can you talk about ultimately like why you decided, what was the impetus to just come to the state, to New York, and ultimately like when you got here, I know you didn't like immediately connect with Will Lee and those cats, but I mean, like, can you talk about like some of the early support mentors that you had when you arrived in the Big Apple?
Yeah, well, I moved here because, it's kind of funny. Since I grew up in Israel, the whole time, friends of mine always told me, "Oh, you need to go to New York. You need to go to New York." So at some point, I was like, "Okay, let me try it." And also the music that I wanted to play was more in New York than in Israel. I could have stayed in Israel and worked, but I wasn't
Right,
really,
right.
that wasn't really interested to me anymore. So when I came here, like if you come out of a school in the States or something and you move, you have some kind of network of people. I had a few friends of mine from Israel that were already here and they were doing pretty good in the jazz scene. So that was helpful in terms of just like on a personal level. But in terms of the career, everybody find his own kind of way and his own path. So the fact that they were playing jazz at different clubs or with different artists, that didn't make any difference to me. But I just met certain people along the way, So I think the first A player that I played with was Anton Fig, because some guy there was a club called La Barbette. It used to be actually a really famous studio in New York. They did a lot of work there, and then it became a club. And I met this bass player, a good friend of mine named Frank Canino, really kind of good old school
Oh my,
R&B.
I know Frank. I've interviewed Frank. That dude is he's such a mensch, man.
Oh, you interviewed Canino? Wow.
Dude, that dude is because he was really the last vestiges of like that late 70s
Yes.
jazz scene in New York, which was not really there in the 80s. Go ahead, continue.
So he kind of, I played a jam with him and he liked me and he started to call me to play or to sit in with his band. So I sat in with his band at this club named La Barbette, and for some reason the booking agent there liked me. I have no idea why. So he gave me a gig, like a once a month gig, and he hooked me up with Anton Fig, and that was the first time I played with like a what you call like an A list player. So that's how the whole thing started. And then I just started to do this thing on regular basis. It wasn't every week. It was like once a month or whatever. And I was able to call players that I always wanted to play with. Like I remember calling like, I don't know, Mark Egan played bass, Chris
Oh yeah, my
played
boy
drums,
right there. That's
like different
unbelievable.
people. I think Bernard Wright played keyboard. So it was that kind
What?
of,
Yeah,
yeah,
dude.
yeah.
Love
And
this,
then
dude.
and then Keith Carlock and I moved to New York around the same time. So we kind of got into the scene together. So I used to play with Keith a lot. It's like, so it was that kind of thing. You just kind of, you started to meet the people that you're supposed to meet, and then you go your own way with wherever it leads you.
In that very incubative time with Anton and with with Bernard or Carlock, I mean, were you able to get gigs, mean paid gigs, and being able to play original music?
No, what happened was I somehow survived New York. I don't know how, but I think the way I survived was, I was doing gigs with other people, most maybe some singer-songwriter, maybe some wedding gigs, like club dates.
Sure, sure.
Oh, and a little bit of recordings, like everything you can do, you just do. It's like you don't really ask too many questions.
Even the
Uh,
Masters did that.
of course,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Um, in terms of the artistic thing, I never wanted to be a solo artist. It wasn't like I had this idea of, oh, I'm gonna be the next Steve Vai or something. That was never a part anything in my head. What I was thinking, which was kind of a naive and a little bit of a stupid thing from my end, was I thought that if I'm gonna make a band in New York and play, people would notice me. That was true, and it worked out. The only thing I didn't know at the time is that when people see you play your own band, they actually think that you're a band leader, and they don't really call you to play gigs.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a
Wow.
that's a that's
Interesting. Interesting.
that's a pretty common, thing that's been going on for years with pretty much everybody that's a solo artist. So
So basically, you're saying if you weren't already determined to be an accompanist, if they saw you as a leader, you probably weren't getting calls for gigs.
not as much, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and what happened is the more, I was just playing because I just wanted to play and wanted to be noticed. So I had a little trio or quartet, and I would play either that place La Barbette, and then I started to play the Bitter End and some other places. But the thing was, so people did notice me, but they also kind of noticed that I'm like a soloist. So then they don't go. They a lot of in a lot of situations, you kind of perceive in a certain kind of way, and you don't get the calls that maybe I wanted to get as a sideman. Now, the more my solo thing got bigger and bigger, then it even got worse in terms of that, because then you start to have a name as a solo artist, and then some people think, oh no, he doesn't do session work, or
He's too good for that. Yeah, right.
oh
He's
yeah,
a
like
leader.
stuff
Yeah,
like that. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the thing that I've been not struggling, that I've been kind of fighting my whole life really in New York.
So I mean, the point is, you're jonesing to get other gigs. Like, you would love to be called for gigs. You're making that
No,
announcement.
I still do it. It's not that I don't do it, but the more known I got to be with what I'm doing, people just have this idea that, oh yeah, he does his own thing, you know. And my original idea was not to do that. My original idea was not even to do records. My original idea was just to play with good players and be noticed and get called to work. You know, that's pretty much was all I wanted. It was not, there was no big want to conquer the world kind of thing, you know.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, you're so when you started to become a bigger name as a leader, um, can you talk about what, even if you weren't even conscious of it, what you were doing in hindsight that allowed you to cut above the morass of every other band or group in New York? Like, what allowed you to cut above to become a name recognizable? I mean, I've been at this 14 years. It's the slowest rolling snowball in the history of mankind. I've done 2,000 interviews. I've published 5 books. I've talked to so many amazing luminary geniuses, and yet, I'm still just the Jake Feinberg show, and I'm okay with that. But
Yeah,
I know that I'm doing something different than any other broadcaster. And so, like,
sure.
my idea of success is like cutting above the morass. What made you unique enough to get to become a name?
I think um I think the fact that I was doing it regularly for so many years, and then I got a record deal, and I've started to record records, and I had a place that I can play I used to every week in New York. I used to play at the bitter end every Monday for almost 18 years, for like
Oh my
17
God.
years. Yeah.
Oh,
And I've done it consistently. So, and through those 17 years, I was basically able to make like about 10 solo albums. So because that was kind of like my lab, So
oh my God.
I think just by doing that, you kind of like people kind of started to know that, oh, I'm in that club, and then I started to make those records. Then I started to do a little tour here, a little tour there, and it started to kind of snowball a little bit. But it took forever, It still takes forever. It's not that it never ends,
It definitely doesn't ever end. But I mean, were you at that time? Was it the kind of stuff that you were playing so early on in your residency at the bitter end? I mean, these were Oz Noy original tunes. What was like the instrumentation of the band? I guess what I'm
It
trying to say is,
started it started as a guitar trio. Actually, the guitar trio started in Israel, not in New York. What happened was in Israel, I always worked as a sideman. I was doing a lot of TV shows. I was in a house band for a big TV show. I played with a bunch of the big singer-songwriters in Israel. So that was always somehow going on. But I always did jazz gigs on the side. And then there was a period when I got stopped getting called to do jazz gigs. So I decided that I want to do my own thing, that I want to keep doing it. So there was a club in Tel Aviv, and I already used to play jazz there with a saxophone player. So I went to the guy and I was like, hey, what if I'm going to play some blues there, like a blues trio? And he goes like, yeah, yeah, sure. So I started to do that.
oh,
And that was kind of the beginning of my trio, because after playing a couple of weeks of blues, I was like, it's kind of boring. Let's do some more like R&B and funk. So that was that. And then I started to play jazz lines over that kind of stuff. So when I moved to New York, I had a little concept and a couple of tunes of a guitar trio. And then I just started to do a guitar trio at the bitter end, really. And at the La Bar band, I was doing a bigger band, but it was just because somehow I got somebody gave me the gig,
I mean, This
It's
is
kind of
so
why.
classic.
So
What was the
it
name?
was
I
mostly
need to know.
trio.
I need to know the name of this TV show you were in the house band with.
Oh, it's called. It was in Hebrew. It's called Rishon Babidur. It was first in entertainment. I don't know how you
So
know the.
beautiful. I mean, so that was like it was almost like it was
It was
almost
kind of
like
a
a night.
David Letterman kind of thing. I was in the
Yeah.
house, but it wasn't every day. It was just on a weekend, you know.
And you were kind of like playing for skits or little themes or
Oh
vibes
yeah,
here.
yeah. I was in the house band. You know, we would do everything. We would play between commercials. We would play with artists. We would play for skits, whatever necessary we did.
Were you I remember interviewing Ahmad Jamal and he joined the union at 10 years old. Were you was there like a music union?
Yes,
You yeah, you were
yeah.
there, got your
I
picked up your
joined
check.
when I was maybe 16.
You know, I wanted to focus on this for a minute. This is really important. You talk about Anton Fig as an A player.
Yeah,
And there's just a lot of different questions in my head, but you know, you had a kind of quasi-traditional, untraditional upbringing in many ways. I mean, you didn't grow up.
completely untraditional.
Yeah, I mean, the only in the sense of like you're very modest, obviously, but very off the grid. And now in Tucson, where I live, the most inspirational, creative, original music is coming from cats in their 30s, even their late 20s, and some of the best musicians I know in this town, a few of them dropped out of Berkeley because the my I guess the question for Oz Noy is, and I couldn't ask a better person, can you codify the language of jazz or blues? The reason these cats are dropping out of Berkeley or places like that is because the school now is it's made for how do you brand yourself? How can you become a professional?
I teach at Berkeley. I don't agree with you. I'll tell you why.
Okay, so push back on me because you know what it is? Like Charlie Mariano would get off the road in the 60s, and I'm not trying to be nostalgic here, but it's like he would get off the road, go to the Schillinger house, go at Berkeley. He'd maybe kick a drug habit, learn a new instrument, and then there was so much work, he would get back on the touring circuit.
I
So it
get
was
it.
go ahead. I want you to push back on me because all I'm saying is it just seems to me that it's much less about musicality and much more about how to brand yourself in this era of branding.
Well, that's got nothing to do with Berkeley. That's just got to do with the world we live in, and it sucks. But
It
that's
does
how
suck.
it is. It really sucks. If you don't have any branding or internet or like computers chops, you're pretty much screwed. You can't do anything. Even if you're the greatest musician on planet Earth, you're not
Right.
going to be anywhere. Nobody will notice you. It's awful. But let me get back to the Berkeley thing.
Please, please.
I never went to university. I went to two or three private teachers that were okay. Like they were good teachers, but they were not on a super high level. And they got me very basic information. And I have a lot of musical holes, you know what I mean? So everything else that I learned here in New York just from being in the playing in in the scene here. I took like two guitar lessons from Stern, from Mike, and then it was
Yeah.
guitar lesson. We just played, and then we became friends, and we kept playing. But so I never really got any real formal education. So I've been teaching at Berkeley now for 3 years, and I got to tell you, first of all, I wish I would have gone there because there would be a lot of stuff that I still don't know, and I didn't know that I would have learned there. Second of all, I think it's a really, really good school, but what's good about it is this the student makes like you make it what you make what's good about the school, you know what I mean? Like make basically you get the information and you do whatever you want to do with it. I'm not, the curriculum in Berkeley is good. I don't think it's great, but I think most of it is really, really good. And the fact that you're around other musicians is really, really good. And it's really, I see students that's starting and I see how they develop so quick there. It's pretty amazing. So I'm completely into, I think Berkeley or any of those other schools, I think they're really, really good schools. I just think it's about the student.
I
It's not
want
about the
okay, no,
school.
no,
Like there's
but I want to
students
go
that you
further.
can
This is
give them.
I think you articulated that very well, but here's the bottom line. Oz, no, I mean again, different time and all that stuff, but the criminal thing about what's happening is you're talking about the individual student, and I don't care
Yes.
if it was Sco or Ernie Watts or Dick Burke or Gene Perla or
Hmm.
all these other. There was so much work. I mean, the point is there were bands. I mean, you specifically learned on the bandstand. You
Correct.
played the kids. I don't care how much you develop your facility or your chops, or you play in the student union. There are no. You can't go to the combat zone and play for strippers all night. You can't. There aren't none of those gigs that get you into.
There's a lot less of them. That's true.
And so what I'm saying is, to me, like that's what it was about. Charlie Mariano would go, and and there was big bands. There was so much work that you would just get back on the road. Maybe you learn a new instrument, but it's like, what do you say? How do you square the circle with cats who are, like you say, developing, making it what it you're making it what it is as a student, and yet it's like the magic of jazz or instrumental music is the bandstand conversation.
Yeah. I think when the students are in the school, they have certain opportunities to play in the school. But once they get out to the real world, I don't really have an answer for that because it's so weird now what's
It's
going on. Like,
weird, man. It's
yeah,
weird.
people are stuck in front of the computers watching YouTube or whatever else, and there's a lot less clubs. So I don't really know how all those kids are coming out and like getting their feet wet on stage. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know how they do it, but there is still stuff. I don't know. I think there is little gigs that you can do and stuff. It's not what it used to be, but nothing is ever what it used to be. Things always change. So they have to, I guess, find different ways to develop their skills. But I would say one thing: I wouldn't if when I was 18, there's some students there that I thought I wasn't even close to their level when I was 18 because there's so much information to learn by themselves. So it's like an up and down. It's kind of like there's goods and bads to all that stuff, you know?
You're riffing, you're waxing poetic on this. I mean, to me, it's like it's all about it was it seemed so innocent and so it worked so well. I remember interviewing a guy named God, he's still with us. He's still eating cheeseburgers at 94, Jack Peterson, and he was approached by at the Stan Kenton music camp in the early 60s by the head of Berkeley. They didn't even have because the guitar was a rhythm instrument from the Freddie
Yeah,
Green era, you know,
sure.
they didn't even have a jazz curriculum at Berkeley. And they're like, "Yeah, can you write this thing?" And he wound up having, Mick Goodrick in his class, and they were, John Abercrombie. They'd sit around and
Sure.
do these guitar ensembles. It was much more communal. I'm curious about like
I
with
think there's still guitar. That stuff is still going on in Berkeley. That didn't change. What changes what's outside.
right, the
Yeah.
information overload. Yeah,
Well, that no, when I'm saying what's changed is the outside is basically when somebody finished Berkeley or decided he had enough, which I know many people do. It's not a big deal. It's like you get what you can get out of it, and you
right.
go. And but when you go out, what do you go out for too? You know what I mean? So you go to LA, there's barely any live scene in LA. It's very small. You go to New York, there is a live scene, but it's smaller than it used to be. So that's more of the question, or like what are those kids gonna do when they come out?
Well, I mean, Harvey Mason was getting gigs from Alan Dawson, his professor. It was very. I mean, I don't think Oz
Well,
Noy.
he was in the 70s when it was so much
It
work
was
to
ridiculous. I mean,
everyone.
it worked so well. I mean, I'm curious, like, do you, even though you weren't an ear trained musician per se, how do you I mean, part of the issue in some ways is that we're saturated with so much
Correct.
visual material now, and
Correct.
so much visual material is so mediocre. So unless you're like seeking and going deep and deep to find the real stuff, you're just awash in visual mediocrity. And I'm curious about how you try to wean if some kids are too caught up in trying to they're studying stuff visually, and you're trying to get them to unlock their ears. Do you have like some sort of story or way that you sort of wean them off this incessant need to take in this visual information, which oftentimes is like you're trying to model their body posture or their, the way they're.
I think the problem is not as much visual as it is from what I notice. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not as much visual because visual was always there. Even before YouTube, you had videos or VHS.
sure, sure.
But the problem is not that. The problem today is everybody's sitting in their apartments and doing like 1 minute clips. They're not. I tell all the students, if they ask me one thing, what was your best advice, blah blah blah, the one advice I give everybody is like, get out of the house and go and play with people, like whether it's friend's house or in a gig or something, because what happens, everybody's stuck at home in their comfort zone. That's not real life, you know what I mean? So
I
that's
love
the
that, dude.
problem.
Exactly.
That's the problem to me, and that's what's getting worse and worse. And this whole thing with the Instagram, where everybody shows off their latest skills. They sit at home in a comfortable environment and do 100 takes and edit their videos to be perfect to show off what they can do for a minute. In the meantime, the guy never stood on stage and interact with other musicians. That's the problem.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
And is that, I mean, that's what Kenny Burrell told me. I mean, where he used to seek out Pepper Adams, Elvin Jones, Donald Byrd, they'd go down and transcribe songs off the records, listening to them,
yeah.
and like playing together in groups, camaraderie, the conversation, the burn.
Correct. Yeah.
And now it's like, and now that takes place maybe in the student union once a month or something. It's also hard to say to younger cats, you might have to do it for free. Like, even if it's not a gig, but play with other people, push yourself out of your comfort zone. And that to me is the only way I've ever grown in my career in life, is by truly being vulnerable to the moment. And I have an easier job because with new media, as a journalist, I'm projecting out the light of the conversation. I wouldn't want to talk to a camera or play my latest solo to the camera. It's very hedonistic in some ways,
Yeah.
Did you first connect with Medeski, Martin, and Wood like in the West Village? I was curious about the West Village scene, if Rock Alarm Bob Moses was down there. Like, that was a fertile place, even in the late 80s.
I wasn't around at that time.
When did you come to New York? Early 90s?
Mid 96.
So when did you first, because those guys, when I was at Boston University.
I don't know. I only know John Medeski, and I just called him to play on my records. I wasn't, when I moved to New York shortly after, Schofield released the Go-Go record. So that was a big deal, but I wasn't aware of them before, you know what I mean? So I wasn't really aware of who they were. And then I never know I don't know the other guys. I just know Medeski, and he was kind enough to play on a couple of my records,
Exactly. No,
but I don't know I know a little bit about them, but I don't really know their history or whatever,
No, totally. No, you talk about being at the bitter end and sort of just being consistent and having that gig for 18 years. Was there like a loft or underground scene, especially when you were just sort of getting your feet wet there? Because at a time, I just remember in West Beth, I mean, going back, Gil Evans, they had artist housing, and that's the other part of it too.
Yeah.
You could in 1 week, if Oz Noy in the 70s had a good week in the studio, I mean, you could pay your rent for a loft, in New York,
Sure.
Was there a loft scene at all when you were first?
No.
Late 90s was done.
No.
So I'd love you to talk a little bit about your concept of leadership. I mean, a lot of people, Miles would have a more of a Zen philosophy. He'd say things to McLaughlin like, play the guitar like you don't know how to play the guitar, and it would make him totally get out of his thinking mind. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy and how you get the best out of your players?
I just hire the best players. That's my philosophy.
Stephen Ferroni, you hire Stephen Ferroni, Will Lee, freaking. I mean, these guys are salt of the earth people, man. It's unbelievable.
Well, here's the thing. When I moved, it's funny that you're talking about it because yesterday I was playing with Ferroni and Randy
Oh
Breck
my God,
and
dude.
those
Are
guys.
you kidding me, dude? This cat, man.
No, and then you know who Ross Titleman is? He's a really
Of
big.
course, dude. He's the producer, right? He worked with
Exactly. He
Clapton and stuff. Yeah.
produced so many of my favorite records. So he lives in my neighborhood. I see him all the time. So anyhow, Ross was there and Steve was there. And so we went just to grab pizza and just to hear both of them talk. It's just unbelievable. They talk about all this stuff. And I had to stop them and go like, I grew up on this shit that you're talking about. That's how I grew up. And they made it. So my point of all of this is I'm very lucky that I can approach pretty much any musician that I want and ask them to play with me. So when I write music, I have certain sounds in mind, and then I think, okay, who would be the right drummer or the right bass player for that? And then I don't call people for recordings. What I do is I try to call people to do some gigs to get a sound of a band to gel, and then I go in the studio. That's what I've done all those years. So it's not that I use this one guy, oh, let's play on a song because you're special. And it's like
That's right. You want to get the vibe going. Yeah.
yeah. So I used to do a lot of basically with all the records that I've done, it was always the same way. So it's really important for me to get a band sound, So usually, let's say like 90% of the time, that's what I was doing all those years. So, and I have access to these guys, so
Dude, I just want to go. I just want to have pizza with you guys. That's unbelievable, man.
yeah. Well, that was one thing I got really lucky with,
Yeah.
And it's not, and I don't call them because they're famous. I call them because I really love their playing and I want to play with them because I think they're the right people to play on my music,
Absolutely. I mean, Oz, we have a really great jazz club here. I really would, I don't know, I would love to have you come down here. It's called the Century Room. I don't know how we're so lucky in Tucson to have this room, but it would be perfect for you to come down here. And I would absolutely love. I mean, you are in such a unique and blessed situation to be able to be with players and actually have a name to get gigs and then get in the studio and you have this sort of cyclical way of singing for your supper. But how much road dogging, if that's the right word, do you do anymore?
I tour. I don't tour as much as people think I tour because whenever
everywhere, man. Yeah.
Whenever you post that you're playing in I don't know, in Canada, everybody thinks that you're on a world tour. You know what I mean? It looks a lot more glamorous on Instagram or Facebook than it actually is. I do tour and I have periods where I tour, but I don't tour that much. I'm definitely not a road dog at all. Road dog is somebody that's out most of the year. I'm not even close to that.
Right. You're not in the Sprinter van, like
no. I do, I'll do a tour in Europe, a tour in the US, a tour in Asia, but it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, nothing,
Did like McLaughlin or Pat Martino or Coriel, did they ever come to Tel Aviv? Did you see any of the masters?
Yeah, of course, all of them did. Martino didn't, but everybody else did.
That is so beautiful, man. I mean, that to me, I mean, Pat was one of my first guests, and I just those cats. I just wanted you to talk before we wrap up set one here. I just wanted you to talk about, most importantly, I mean, what the world needs now, and it always has, is love. And I just kind of wanted you to get Oz Noy's concept. What is your concept of love, and how you bring love to the world?
I just play good music, or I try to play good music. I think music is so powerful in so many ways that it hits a certain part of your not only your psychic, but your soul that nothing else reaches, you know?
Nothing, nothing.
Nothing reaches that.
It resets my nervous system, man.
Exactly. So I don't have I the only I my only little part in this world is just to play music that I think it's pretty and it's good and I think people will enjoy, and that's pretty much it. Everything else, you know, if that helps connect people, or that just helps somebody to feel better and to enjoy it, I think that's pretty good, you know.
No, that's all you need to say. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to let this breathe, but I'd love to do a set two with you down the road, man. It was such an honor to talk to you, brother.
Awesome. Yeah.
And if I ever get, I'm from Long Island, so if I'm back in New York, you live outside, you live like Westchester or something, or you live in the
No,
city?
I live in the city.
Oh, this entitlement lives in your neighborhood?
Yeah, I live in the Upper West Side, Russ, New
Oh
Jersey.
my God, dude, you're loving life, dude. That's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
I see him here and there. It's funny. Every
Oh
time I
my.
see him, I ask him question. So Clapton, what did he do? And Stevie Winwood and you know Ricky Lee Jones or Paul Simon. It's really funny.
Actually, I don't know if this story is pretty powerful, but it's like Steve Gadd, when I interviewed him, when it's just weird, it's just crazy when his son, when Clapton's son
Yeah,
died,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Titleman called Gadd and said, yeah, can you? I forget the exact way the story worked out, but it was just that guy's always been like a connector. He's always been
Yeah,
somebody who's put people together, even when
yeah,
they're grieving. And that's the thing about music is that the one thing about Oz Noy is that it's a racket. It's a racket, and yet you've been able to sort of bounce around that and not get traumatized by it because it does take people out, the music racket.
correct. Well, you have to have patience. You have to be kind of strong. Believe it or not, you have to be strong physically also, because touring is not easy on your body at all. Actually, playing in general is not easy on your body.
No.
So it's all that stuff, and then mentally, you just have to keep going, whatever happens, you know. So all that stuff is not for the weakest, you know.
Have you ever crossed paths with Johnny Vidakovich?
No,
You know who he is?
I know the name, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
no, that's a cat. That New Orleans drummer. I don't know how often you get
Oh
down
yes,
there.
yes, I know who it is. Yes.
He dances, man. Anyway, we'll get into this in set two. But Oz, man, many blessings to you, and
Awesome.
let's stay in touch, man.
Okay, cool, man. Thanks.
Be cool.
Okay, later.
Later.